years of running up the credit cards. The result was devastating. $5.1 billion structural deficit and red ink projected as far as the eye could see. Businesses, jobs, and taxpayers were fleeing the state in record numbers. And as a lifelong Marylander who loves this state, that broke my heart. It also made me frustrated enough to step up and try to do something about it. I pledged that if I was elected governor, that I would do everything in my power to finally bring fiscal responsibility and common sense to our state capital. For 7 years, we have been doing exactly what we said we would do. The day after my swearing in, my first full day on the job, we submitted the first balanced budget in a decade, which eliminated nearly all of the $5.1 billion structural deficit that we inherited. We have not had a single tax increase the entire nearly 7 years since I became governor. Instead, we have cut taxes, tolls, and fees 7 years in a row by more than $2.5 billion. And we put all of that money back into the pockets of hardworking Maryland families, small businesses, and retirees, and back into our growing economy. We changed the entire mission of state government to be unabashedly pro-jobs and pro-business. As a result, Maryland literally did a complete 180-degree turn. Before our administration, Maryland's state economy ranked 49th out of 50 states. We took it to number 6, which was the biggest economic turnaround in America. Last year, the COVID-19 pandemic wreaked havoc on our national and state economies and on small businesses and on struggling Americans and the people of our state. It also had a dramatic effect on federal, state, and local government revenues. Last April, the state comptroller, Peter Francho, was projecting an immediate 50% decrease in revenues with a potential revenue loss of $2.8 billion, threatening to wipe out all of the progress that we had made over 7 years and to plunge the state into a prolonged fiscal crisis. In response, we took decisive actions to protect our state's fiscal health. We immediately instituted a budget freeze on all state spending across all state government agencies, except for COVID-related expenses and payroll necessary to support our employees. We instituted a hiring freeze, and the Maryland Department of Budget and Management determined options and made recommendations for budget cuts which were required in all state agencies, including cuts to the so-called mandated spending. And I vetoed all the bills passed by the Maryland General Assembly which required substantial increases in state spending. As chairman of the National Governors Association, I led the charge for emergency federal aid for struggling Marylanders. And I introduced here in Annapolis and enacted nearly unanimously the Relief Act of 2021, which included the largest tax cut in state history and provided a total of $1.45 billion in urgently needed tax relief and economic stimulus for struggling Maryland families, small businesses, and those who lost their jobs due to the global pandemic. We sent more than 420,000 direct relief checks to Marylanders in need, and more than $100 million in additional grants to small businesses and nonprofit organizations in order to offer a real lifeline to those hardest hit, people who are struggling to get by, and small businesses desperately trying to stay afloat. We reached a bipartisan budget agreement with both the Speaker and the Senate President to responsibly invest federal relief in our workforce and our economy, and we have already committed more of our American Rescue Plan funds than just about any other state. We distributed more than $14.1 billion in unemployment aid, and we have committed more than $248 million in relief to keep people in their homes. As a result of all these actions, we were able to keep Maryland open for business. Our private sector is experiencing the 4th fastest job growth of all the states, and we've had one of the best economic recoveries in the nation. A national survey recently named Maryland as the single most improved state for business in America. Because we had such strong health and economic recovery, tax revenues are expected to be $1.6 billion higher than projected. And because our state agencies responded to our call to tighten their belts, we were able to return to the taxpayers another $195 million more than expected. The entire mission of my administration has been to leave our state in a stronger fiscal position than we found it, and that is exactly what we have done. Amazingly, for the first time since fiscal year 1999, the state of Maryland is projecting that we will take in more money than we are spending. And we're proud to have established a national model for COVID recovery. We're one of the most vaccinated states in the country with one of the lowest COVID case rates in America, which has helped enable our economy to boom. And with this surplus, we will continue practicing fiscal discipline while prioritizing relief that continues to advance our economic recovery. With that in mind, today I am announcing a 5-point framework for how the state of Maryland will utilize the surplus. First, we will bolster and increase the state's rainy day fund to at least 7.5%, or $1.67 billion, saving that extra revenue to have it available to use for potential recessions and or other crisis times ahead. Secondly, our budget framework will include major tax relief for our state's retirees. I still hear nearly every day from folks who say to me that they love the state of Maryland, they've spent their whole life here, they don't want to leave their kids and grandkids, but that they can't afford to retire here in Maryland. And this is the one category where we are still not competing effectively with other states. Sadly, we're one of the worst states in the country to retire in. Even though we're one of the best places in America to live, and we have so many great things going for us, we're losing many of our best citizens. Cutting retirement taxes is one of the most important things we can do, and something we have been trying to accomplish for 7 years, but the legislature has failed to support this critical relief for seniors. Each year when I have proposed it, legislators have almost immediately rejected it, saying that we can't afford it. Now, with our fiscal health stronger than ever before, what we cannot afford is failing again to take immediate action to ease the crippling tax burden on our retirees. All we need is the political will on both sides of the aisle to finally get it done. Third, we will build on the Relief Act by proposing additional direct tax relief for working families across the state who need help most. After a long and difficult 19 months of sacrifice and struggle, my top economic priority continues to be making sure that Marylanders can keep more of their hard-earned money in their own pockets. Fourth, as we continue our recovery, we will continue to deliver much-needed assistance for Marylanders who need it the most. Last year, we took immediate actions to stand up emergency relief programs to assist our small businesses, farmers, our restaurants, hotels, our nonprofits, entertainment venues, and main streets. And thanks to all those relief measures, we continue to have one of the best economic recoveries in the country. But there are still Marylanders who are struggling to make ends meet. So earlier this week, after receiving federal approval, I directed the Maryland Department of Human Services to take immediate action to release emergency allotments of SNAP benefits to eligible households. And as we put our budget together, we will continue to provide additional targeted relief for those Marylanders who need it the most. Fifth, with fall negotiations for collective bargaining for public employees about to begin, I have directed the Department of Budget and Management to explore how to best utilize some of these funds to the benefit of our hardworking and dedicated state employees who have been unwavering in their commitment throughout our COVID-19 response. With this budget framework, my message is pretty simple. As long as I am governor, I will continue to fight for fiscal discipline I will continue working hard every single day to make it easier for Maryland families, small businesses, and retirees to stay in our state. And I will continue fighting to allow Marylanders to keep more of their hard-earned money in their own pockets so that we can continue changing Maryland for the better. With that, I'd be happy to take some questions.
What made you to use that money, maybe say not for education, not for housing? Could you explain some parts of what you've already done before?
Yeah, we've put more into rental relief than at just about any other state in the country. We've done it very effectively. We started, I think, 5 or 6 months before the federal benefits took place. We have very little housing problem right now. I think we're probably the best in the country at getting the rental relief and housing funds out to assist people. We have a very low eviction rate in the state, very few people that are not able to pay their rent. But that's where most of our focus has been. That's where we've both put state and federal dollars out on the streets. But as I mentioned in my remarks, we are going to continue to help those that are struggling and in need in every way that we possibly can. Anybody else?
Governor, the only price tag that came with your 5-point plan was the bolstering of the rainy day fund. The 5-point plan that you proposed, does that essentially consume the roughly $5 billion in surplus and additional?
Well, everything I talked about has a price tag. I mean, we do have, if we put our budget together in January, we do have to account for the tax cuts that we're talking about as well. So that's real dollars that we have to account for. But we're going to, these are the broad outlines of how we plan to spend the next couple of months addressing, how we continue to keep the state moving forward on good financial footing. But the details of that budget, we submit to the legislature will be sometime in January.
Last week, the Capital Debt Affordability Committee talked about the possibility of using these new revenue floors as a way to expand the amount of money that the state borrows, especially given the fact that they believe that they can borrow money at a cheaper rate.
Yeah.
Do you support expanding how much money the state could potentially borrow moving forward?
I mentioned that one of the biggest problems we had was all the money that we had borrowed, and that we had a $5.1 billion structural deficit when I got here. We finally have got a structurally balanced budget moving forward into the future as far as we can see. And I don't know about the logic of trying to go backwards and take us back to the kinds of over-borrowing and overspending that we've done in the past.
I'm sorry if I missed the number figure, but how much of this windfall will go to bolster the state's rainy day funding? Can you give an example of what kind of enhancements state workers might be looking at?
Well, we can't get into the discussions of details about what we might be negotiating with our public employee unions moving forward, but we're going to try to find ways to work together with them to provide them some I think, well-earned, additional compensation some way that we can. So we can't get into the details on it. With respect to the rainy day fund, we talked about raising it to 7.5%, which is higher than it's been, and at 1.4 million. I'm not sure where it is now. Maybe the budget secretary can, how much cash that would.
Yeah, how much of this surplus do you plan to put in the bank?
The goal is to get it to 7.5%, or we're statutorily required to be at 5% now. And so that'll take us to about 1.4, close to $1.5 billion. It looks like our general fund now is going to be in the $20 billion range. So that's what we're going to target. And the issue here, again, is to ensure that we have shock absorbers and cushions. You see how quickly it changed from 12 months ago. The governor is on track with what he wants to do in trying to provide some relief, but then also making sure that we talk to state employees who've stuck by the state through all this, but then also try to make sure that we conform to the law as we negotiate all that going forward.
So with that, I'm so sorry, the numbers went so fast, so I just wondered how much of the $2.5 billion you're going to put away in the rainy day fund.
If we stick it aside there, it'll be in the $1.4 to $1.5 billion range based on the $20 billion number that we have.
Sorry.
So, Governor, on the retirement, that's a huge piece of the pie. Can you elaborate a little bit more? Because people are leaving the Delaware.
It's one of the things that, you know, I talked about running for governor the first time in 2014, and I really heard this constantly. I still hear it today, as I mentioned. I hear people constantly saying, I don't want to leave the state. I don't want to leave my kids and grandkids, but I can't afford to stay here. They're moving to Delaware. They're moving on. We have states all around us that don't have retirement taxes, and we've got one of the highest ones in the country. We have people moving to the south, just about anywhere they can. And it's not because they hate the state of Maryland or they don't want to live here. They like the quality of life. They like a lot of things that we have. They just, we're making it, we're forcing them out of the state, and we're losing some of our really, you know, best contributors that we want to keep, that they've spent a lifetime here. So it's something that we've been talking about since 2014. We have cut retirement taxes. We've nibbled around the edges 5 different times. We've passed small chunks of retirement cuts. We passed the Hometown Heroes Act. We cut taxes for military retirees, and we then did those multiple times each, but broad-based retirement tax cuts to help every single, you know, person that's struggling to retire. That's what we continue to want to get done, and now we can afford to do it. You know, I understand the concerns. The legislature said, well, this is going to take tax revenue. We can't afford to give that money back to the people who are paying it. Well, now we can, and so we think it's probably the most important way to spend the money.
So for people who are watching this who are retired about retiring, is your message now?
The message is we're going to continue to try to fight for them, and I think now's the time to weigh in with your legislators to say how important it is. I mean, I know how important it is to the folks that you're talking about, but I think the word hadn't gotten through to some of our friends on the other side of the aisle in the state legislature.
Governor Hogan, looking at all this money, we have the conversations often, especially at the start of the year, about schools in Baltimore City getting reduced to HVAC. I know the money has been allocated, but did you think about using this money to expedite that process and get those air conditioners and heat systems up to date faster?
Well, as we've talked about before, Mackenzie, this is, you know, Baltimore's the 3rd highest funded school system in America. We also, you know, our 21st Century Schools program, we're building all of the new schools in the city, the state is. We've opened schools, brand new schools, you know, constantly. I don't know how many the total is now, 21 new schools, I think. And we've record funded them 7 years in a row. We actually put money specifically in multiple times for them to fix the air conditioners. It's not a question of money. It's simply their refusal to expedite getting the air conditioning done. They came up with you know, we wanted it done almost immediately. We put all the money in to do it immediately. They came back with some crazy, you know, 5-year plan. And we're like, well, with 5 years, we're still having kids that can't get to school. It doesn't make sense. Anne Arundel County did air conditioning every school in 1 year. We showed Baltimore City how to do it.
An off-topic question, as a grandfather and governor, Pfizer announced that they applied for emergency
Yeah.
use for their shots for kids. We know it could be approved by the end of this month, but what I'm hearing from the state health department and local health departments is that it's going to be, they understand it'll be a different formulation, like different vials, and as far as they know, there's none of that in the state. What have you heard from the White House on your weekly calls about is this certain special vaccine?
Well, so here's the great news finally. You know, we've been talking about this stuff and pushing for it for a while. Not only, so the Pfizer has submitted for approval for the 5 to 11-year-olds, which is going to be a huge shot in the arm, so to speak, for us to make sure our kids are protected in school. They also have this week put in for approvals of both Moderna and J&J and kind of mixed use where you can get one and then get a booster of the other. And so all of that, hopefully, some of it is going to, I think, take place within the next 2 weeks. But potentially all of those could be approved by Halloween, by the end of this month. I think the worst case scenario would be like a couple days later, beginning of November. So it's going to be a huge amount of work for us, but we're excited to finally be able to move forward. You know, we've already done 140,000 boosters, all Pfizer. We've called 850,000 people about their eligibility for boosters and to try to make appointments. We've scheduled nearly 80,000 more appointments. So we're up to almost, between what we've already done and what's scheduled, almost 250,000 booster shots of Pfizer. That's going to open up a huge new number of people when we get Moderna and J&J. And then, of course, the kids is a big group that's probably going to be a couple weeks after that, maybe by the 31st. But we'll be prepared. We have been working on these plans for months. We've just been waiting for the approvals. The federal government has not made the determination about dosing sizes, so you can't have the vials already ready, until that decision is made. But the White House has assured us that they will have no problem. We have plenty of supply right now for all the doses we have of multiple kinds, but if there's some change in dosing from sizes for the younger kids, that they say that their supply chain will be ready to immediately get that out to the states. And we're working together. The state health department is working with our local school systems and with our county health departments to try to make sure that everybody is ready to immediately begin those vaccinations the moment that we're given the authorization to do so.
Governor, your former chief of staff, William Graff, indicted yesterday. Two questions. Were you questioned as part of that investigation, and do you anticipate being called as a potential witness should it go to trial?
Yeah, it was, this has been a year-long investigation by both state and federal prosecutors. It's kind of an outrageous situation that we've all learned more about over time. It's something that's kind of disgraceful, and we're glad that we were able to get to the bottom of it. We immediately, as soon as we learned about this, of course, we parted ways with this employee, and we took instant action on reforming the whole agency to try to make sure something like this couldn't happen again. But we also immediately, when the investigations began, I directed my staff and all of us to provide as much assistance as we could to the prosecutors, and as part of that, I did sit down with them. I was happy to provide them with whatever information that they required.
In your phone conversations that he is accused of illegally recording with you, do you say what was discussed or why you might have?
I don't know any of the details of what the conversations were. I think they were just mostly, we have dozens of meetings every day. This was in the heart of the COVID crisis. He was on a lot of those calls, but I haven't really studied what the calls were or what was on the calls.
Was there any consideration to using some of this additional state money to bolster the state employees pension program?
I think we have had some discussions about that. We haven't made final decisions on exactly what we're going to do, but I can tell you that in our discussions internally with our budget team, it's one of the options that we're considering.
That's it, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.